On global news, former U.S. fighter pilot held in Australia to fight U.S. extradition. Olaf Scholz of Germany meets China's Russia signals probable Kherson retreats, but the Ukraine wary. And China, Russia have power to stop North Korean nuclear tests, U.S. says. This and more stories to come your way. An ex-U.S. fighter lawyer has said the pilot Daniel Edmund Dungan, 54, was arrested in a rural part of New South Wales state in October by Australian Federal Police acting on a U.S. request for his arrest. His lawyer said on Friday Dungan had arrived in Australia from China weeks before and had related with Australian intelligence agencies. Details of the U.S. arrest warrant and the charges he faces are sealed, his lawyer said. Dungan's arrest on October 21st came the same week the UK government issued a rare warning about China's recruitment of retired British military pilots. The Australian government confirmed Dungan was arrested at Washington's request, although US authorities have refused to say more and the charges remain unknown. Dungan will be moved to a maximum security prison and did not seek bail, his lawyer said. The case was adjourned until November 28th. Australia's Attorney General's Department said Dungan's stated intention to make a complaint was a matter for him. The Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, IGES, in an independent oversight office declined to comment. Dungan will separately complain that China had interfered with his human rights and freedom of movement in China. He is a well-regarded fighter jet pilot, a fellow ex-Marine said according to reports, and had recently worked in China training commercial flight crew. China's foreign ministry has denied any acknowledgement of the appointment of British pilots after reports in the UK said more than 30 pilots had accepted lucrative offers to train China's military. Olaf Scholz, German Chancellor, has met with Chinese President Xi Jinping during the first visit by a leader of the group of 7 G7 nations to China in 3 years. Leading a high-level business delegation to China on Friday, the German leader's emphasis on improving economic ties with Beijing has led to criticism of his apparent desire to seal deals with a nation growing more authoritarian under President Xi. German industry's heavy dependence on China has also faced renewed scrutiny, particularly over Berlin's reliance on Russian energy imports, with the country deeply exposed when Moscow cut off supplies in retaliation of sanctions imposed over its invasion of Ukraine. Scholz's arrival in Beijing marked the first visit by a leader of the G7, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2019. During a face-to-face meeting with Scholz on Friday, Xi said that as large nations with influence, China and Germany should work together during times of change and turmoil for the sake of world peace, according to reports. Scholz told Chinese president that it was good both leaders were meeting in person during tense times with the Russian invasion of Ukraine creating problems for the rules-based international order, according to reports from Scholz's delegation. Ahead of the visit, German opposition politician Norbert Röttgen said that Scholz's approach to Beijing appeared to be supported by the idea that we want to keep doing business with China no matter what that means for the dependence of our economy and for our ability to act. Berlin says there were consultations with major partners in the US and Europe ahead of the visit, and Scholz also promised a candid exchange with Chinese leaders on sensitive subjects. On climate and economy, China's foreign ministry said climate change diplomacy between China and the United States cannot be separated from broader political tensions between the two sides, and Washington must take responsibility for the breakdown in talks. Close to 200 countries are about to assemble in the town of Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, for another round of global climate negotiations, but diplomatic tensions between the two biggest sources of climate warming greenhouse gas have threatened to overshadow the meeting known as COP27. Agreements and joint declarations by Beijing and Washington helped drive through the landmark Paris Agreement in 2015, but China suspended all bilateral discussions in August following U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, a self-ruled island China claims as part of its territory. China has not suspended cooperation with other countries and will continue to support the multilateral climate negotiation process, the spokesperson said, adding that China was willing to communicate and coordinate with all parties to ensure COP27 was successful. Expectations ahead of COP27 were already low amid global concerns about energy supplies brought about by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the worsening China-US relationship has driven those expectations even lower, experts said. Of Dnieper River, but as the United States sounded an optimistic note on Ukraine's ability to recapture the strategically important southern city of Kherson, Kyiv was more cautious. The area includes Kherson City, the capital of the region of same name, and the only major Ukrainian city captured intact since Russia invaded the country 8 months ago. It also includes one side of a dam across the Dnieper, which controls the water supply to irrigate Crimea, the Ukrainian peninsula Russia seized and later annexed in 2014. Earlier, Russia had denied its forces were planning to withdraw from the area, with any retreat representing an important defeat for its forces. There was no word on Thursday from senior officials in the Kremlin as photos circulated on social media of significant buildings no longer flying Russian flags. Natalia Humenik, a spokesperson for Ukraine's Southern Military Command, said talk of a retreat could be a Russian trap, and photos shared on pro-Kremlin Telegram accounts misinformation. Russia has been fighting for months to hang on to the pocket of land it holds on the West Bank at the mouth of the Dnieper River that bisects Ukraine. Ukraine has been advancing since the start of October, attacking the main bridges across the river and making it difficult for Russia to keep supplying its troops on the West Bank. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin speaking at the Pentagon on Thursday back to back. Now, the United States believes China and Russia has leveraged. The Khan official who said on condition of anonymity, said that while the U.S. had been saying since May that North Korea was preparing to resume nuclear testing for the first time since 2017, it was not clear when it might conduct such a test. South Korea has also been warning of a seventh nuclear test for months, while the United Nations nuclear watchdog said last week that Pyongyang had been readying for a test. Washington wanted to see Russia and China do what they could to dissuade Pyongyang. The U.S. has asked for a public meeting at the United States of missile launches, including an intercontinental ballistic missile ICBM that South Korea and Japan detected on Thursday. North Korea is banned from conducting nuclear tests and ballistic missile launches under Security Council sanctions, which have been straightened by Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, has undermined the consensus on how to deal with North Korea. In May, Russia and China vetoed as U.S.-led effort to impose more United Nations sanctions on Pyongyang over its renewed ballistic missile test, having backed tighter sanctions in 2017. The U.S. official said Pyongyang might have delayed its resumption of nuclear testing because of China, its closest ally, which recently concluded its Communist Party Congress, an event held once every 5 years. North Korea's COVID-19 outbreak might also have delayed military development, he said, making the country more focused on ways which they could get support from particularly China. Reiterating calls for North Korea to resume dialogue with the U.S., which collapsed over sanctions relief in 2019, the official said Washington was prepared to engage directly with Pyongyang and to discuss humanitarian assistance. North Korea has conducted a record West and South Korea, which Pyongyang claims are aggressive and provocation. The ICBM was among 3 ballistic missiles fired on Thursday, a day after it launched at least 20 missiles, the most in a single day, including one that landed off South Korea's coast of its maritime border. More stories in the shores of Africa. Egypt goes back to solar power to lessen farming costs and emissions. As rises in temperatures affect diverse aspects of people's lives in Egypt's climate, Egyptian farmers have turned to solar power. In Egypt's delta, solar panels financed by the UN are helping farmers power the irrigation of their crops. Soaring fuel costs are encouraging some farmers to turn to renewable energy like solar power, but even that is sometimes remains financially out of reach. Solar energy is one of the most successful 2030 visions. The government intends to increase the supply of electricity generated from renewable sources to 42% by 2035. This vision is set to help Egypt apprehend its numerous climate change issues, notably the steadfast disappearance of the Nile. United Nations said 8 million South Sudanese experiencing starvation, and famine, according to the United Nations. According to the joint report by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, where food insecurity and malnutrition has never been higher, surpassing levels witnessed even during the violence in 2013 and 2016, which runs from April to July 2023, and 1.4 million children will be minorities, soaring food and fuel prices, and a decrease in financing for humanitarian operations. About 909,000 people were affected by floods in South Sudan, where fighting, natural disasters, a bad economy, and constant political upheaval. It has been at war for more than 10. Ugandan government seeks repayments from South Sudan. Uganda has in 2018, Parliament endorsed government's request to clear 151 billion shillings owed to Ugandan traders and companies by the South Sudan government. Ugandan traders supplied in 2013. The payment process was interrupted. Following this, the two governments entered into a mutual agreement that will ensure Uganda clears the payment and treat it as a loan to the government of South Sudan. The finance number 2022 said he had written to the South Sudan government asking for the reimbursement of the money they paid to Ugandan traders. He said that they waited to start demanding the repayment after they conclude the payments. Kasaija's response followed questions from the Committee on the Selective Payment of South Sudan Traders. The committee chairperson, Honorable Mwai Mpaka, asked the minister to explain how they selected the complaints who do not appear on the list. According to the agreement, the money was to be paid back between 5 to 10 years with an interest of 6% after the first year. Government has so far paid 155 billion shillings to Category 1 international company, APO, General Agencies and Queen's Transport, Trade and Investment, and Roko Construction Company, among others. Meanwhile, Kasaija has also committed to reaching out to other Ugandans who lost their property and also lost their dear ones in South Sudan so that they can dialogue with the government of South Sudan on possible list. According to Honorable Francis Mwijeke, the Bueje County MP, several traders and parents and siblings of people protests rage against M23 rebels as discontent against Occidental powers rise in Democratic Republic of Congo. The European Union flag was set on fire in the city of Bukavu in eastern DRC as hundreds of Congolese protested against the M23 rebels, voicing their discontent with the involvement of great powers such as the United States, Great Britain, and France. The president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, called Thursday evening the youth of his country to organize themselves in groups of vigilance in the face of the M23 rebellion, which are our minerals, he accused in a message to the nation, according to a report. The eastern DRC has been plagued for closely 3 decades by violence from armed groups, numerous of them inherited from wars that bloodied the region in the wake of the 1994 Rwandan genocide. Tensions have been mostly high between Kinshasa and Kigali since the resurgence in the late 2021 of the M23 March 23 movement, of former Tutsi rebellion that has taken up arms against, blaming Kinshasa for failing to respect agreements on the demobilization of its fighters. Kinshasa accuses Rwanda of supporting this rebellion, which Kigali contests, accusing the DRC of collusion with the Hutu rebel movement. Stay with us. You're welcome back. Zoom on Nigeria. Amanda Uzubike, a Nigerian descent, becomes Brigadier General in the U.S. Army in Fort Knox, Kentucky. Azubike, who was born in London, England to Nigerian parents, entered the United States Army. Rainey, commander of the U.S. Army Futures Command, claimed that Azubike makes everyone around her better. After an 11-year career in aviation, she joined the Army as an officer in charge of public affairs and relations, formerly a chief of staff / senior military advisor at the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Azubike is currently a deputy commanding officer at the U.S. Army Cadet Command. She also served as the chief of public affairs for the United States Southern Command, Fort Lauderdale area, and as the Director of Public Affairs for the Joint Force Headquarters National Capital Region / Military District of Washington. I failed as Minister of Education. Adamu said his failure to resolve numerous challenges in the sector despite serving as longest minister in the sector. However, many stakeholders have reacted differently to the statement. While some said he should resign honorable, he can within the limited available time to fix the system at least above where he met it in 2015 when he took charge. Adamu spoke at the 66th National Council on Education (NCE) in Abuja. Meanwhile, he has ordered that any sexual education content in the curriculum taught in Nigerian schools be expunged. He disagreed with education in schools does more harm than good to students, and that he has directed the Nigeria Educational Research and Development Council (NERDIS) to quickly review the curriculum and cultural values, suggesting that such should be maintained and promoted among school children. Reacting, the Academic Staff Union of ASU President Professor Emmanuel Osodeke described the minister as a honest man who had publicly admitted that he has failed as Minister of Education in the past 7 years. People of Biafra, IPOB said its leader Nnamdi Kanu had petitioned the Supreme Court to overturn the Court of Appeal's decision to postpone the execution of the court's verdict dismissing him. Ifeanyi Ejiofor, the lead lawyer for IPOB and human rights campaigner, stated this according to report. He said, and I quote, "We have appealed to the Supreme Court to set aside the ruling of the Court of Appeal, staying the execution of the court's judgment, discharging and placing further bar to any further detention and prosecution of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu on any charge / indictment before any court in Nigeria." Recall that on October 28, 2022, a 3-man panel of learned justices of the Court of Appeal, Abuja Judicial Division, granted an application for the stay of execution of the judgment of the Court of Appeal pending the determination of the appeal filed before the Supreme Court by the federal government. After a thorough review of the said ruling by our defense team, eminently led by foremost leader, senior advocate of Nigeria, Chief Mike Ezekwesili, an informed decision was taken by the erudite senior advocate and entire team that the said ruling, which has no foundation in law or facts placed before the court, should be immediately appealed against for it to be set aside by the apex court. Our well-informed position was given a final nod by our untiring client Oyendumazi Nnamdi Kanu during my last visit to him. We are therefore by this medium informing the general public and Umuchineke in particular that we have filed an appeal against the set ruling of the Court of Appeal delivered October 28, 2022, and will proactively follow up on the administration process to ensure that both appeals are given an accelerated hearing in line with the extant fast-track rules of the Supreme Court. A recap of major stories says former U.S. fighter pilot held in Australia to fight U.S. extradition. Olaf Scholz of Germany meets China's Xi Jinping as trade in focus. China says U.S. to blame for breakdown in climate cooperation. Russia signals probable. Your boast becomes the prophecy of a future failure. The brighter you lift up yourself in pride, the harder you fall in disgrace. Be humble. Thanks for watching. I am Lois Juraiki. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a beautiful weekend ahead.